What's good, y'all? I recently played a game that I was honestly pretty excited to try out, but unfortunately, it was pretty mid. I'm talking about the Crew Motorfest. Now, I'm gonna be honest. I'm not really much of a gamer. My personality is super one-dimensional, and the only thing that makes me happy are cars. So no, I don't play first-person shooters, I don't play MMOs, and I unfortunately do not play Furry feet.
Stop the cap. Stop the cap right now. Stop the cap.
But what I do play a lot of, and I mean a lot of, are racing games. So I'm definitely not some type of video game reviewer or anything like that, but I think I have enough experience with racing games specifically that I think I'm qualified enough to at least talk about and give my opinion on those. With that said though, at the end of the day, this is just my personal opinion. So if you enjoy the game, that's awesome. Don't let some bonehead wearing a dog head on the internet like me ruin that for you. So let's go ahead and talk about Motorfest, because trust me, there's a lot to talk about. The Crew Motorfest is the third game in the franchise and released on September 11th, 2023. I'm a little late to the party, I know. In my defense, this was a game that I've always wanted to try out, but just never came around to it. And I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like recently I've been seeing a lot of Instagram reels of people playing this game, and it made it look pretty fun. Plus the game was on sale, so I figured now's the perfect time to try it out. But anyway, this game is the third entry in the Crew franchise, and it's pretty different from the first two games. The Crew 1 had a more gritty, serious story involving underground street racing and running from the cops. The second game was a little more lighthearted with a more typical premise of becoming the best racer all across the US, participating in legal, sanctioned events. And Motorfest deviates once again, with the theme now being about a motorsport festival with electronic music and car scene culture taking place in a tropical location. Does that sound familiar? Look, we all know I can't talk about this game without mentioning the obvious elephant in the room. And even though this game may be a Forza Horizon clone, I still went into it with an open mind and genuine enthusiasm. I would consider myself a fan of the Forza franchise, not just the Horizon series, but also Motorsport. But with that being said, a lot of the complaints I have about Motorfest, I could also definitely say about some of the Horizon games, particularly the fifth game. Not necessarily in regard to the gameplay itself, but more about this whole style of festival-themed racing games where it's painfully obvious that these games are just slop made by big corporations. Corporations that care more about the game just retaining a decent-sized player base over a period of time and making as much money as possible, rather than actually making a game that is, you know, engaging and has a soul and passion behind it. That is a whole other topic though. I'm just trying to drive home the fact that I don't have any sort of bias against this game just because it's so similar to Forza Horizon 5. The way I see it is, if the game's good, then the game's good. It don't matter to me whether or not the game's a clone. Now, I wish I could say that about this game, but if the thumbnail and title are any good indicator, this is obviously not the case. Before we get into it, I want to real quick mention that I actually haven't played a Crew game before. I don't really know why, to be honest. I just never got around to it. But honestly, I don't think that's a bad thing. Here's my perspective on it. I've heard good things about the Crew series, particularly about the first game. And I also seem to see a lot of people say good things about the second game. So imagine if I went into this game with the expectations set by the last two games. I probably would be using a much more harsh word than mid to be describing this game. But okay, enough of all that. Let's get into the Crew Motorfest. Now, you'd think that the first thing I'd start with is the graphics or the physics or just anything that, you know, is about the game. But no, my first negative experience happened before I even started playing. Ubisoft Connect. This is Ubisoft's social platform, I guess you could call it. Need for Speed does this too with EA Origin, which actually just recently got discontinued. I didn't know that until I was recording this. But basically, to play the game online with other players, you need an account through this. And this is like a separate hub where you can have a list of friends and like be invited or invite other people to games. I already thought this was annoying in Need for Speed. Like, if I already have a Steam account or an Xbox or PlayStation account, why do I now need to make another account for this thing that I'll only be using specifically when I'm playing this game, just so I can play with my friends? But that's actually not why I had a problem with this. The real reason is because this fucking thing is so damn slow. Switching between the different pages would take an insane amount of time. And the only reason why I was trying to navigate this thing is because apparently I already had a Ubisoft Connect account, which I completely forgot about. And the username I have on it is this old name that I came up with when I was in middle school. And I'm not gonna lie, I think it's pretty cringy and embarrassing. And it shows up as your name on the position rankings in a race. And it's displayed to all the other players when you're playing this game. So I really wanted to change it, but for some reason, I can't. That's because you're only allowed to change your name every 30 days. Which doesn't make sense because the last time I would have changed this name would have been years ago. So no, after spending an egregious amount of time simply trying to change a username, I wasn't able to. And I'm stuck with this one. Well, whatever. I'll just deal with it. I'm just gonna exit out of this menu and we can finally get to actually playing the game. Except that this thing is so slow that when you try to close the menu, it will stay on your screen until it finally perceives that it needs to get the fuck out of here. You're still able to play the game. You can navigate all the in-game menus, you can drive a car, but this menu will stay on your screen and block half your view until it finally wakes up from its lobotomized state and moves out of the way. But once it does get out of the way, we can finally play the game. Now, one of the biggest issues that people had with this game was that the map was massively downsized from the last two games, because the Crew 1 and 2 both took place in the US.
Okay. Where in the US?
I mean, in the US. The map was a simplified version of the contiguous 48 states in America. And even though having a map so huge required the games to have some visual drawbacks, the people love this. And I always thought that was something so cool about the franchise. So for fans, it was definitely surprising when Ubisoft announced that this game was only going to take place in part of Hawaii. And honestly, I get that. I can see how it would be pretty disappointing to go from a whole ass country to just part of one state. But I do think it's still a pretty cool setting. And a smaller map means the graphics can be bumped up a little too, which I'll talk about some more later. But let's finally get into some gameplay. You get a nice little introductory cutscene, you get to choose and customize your player model, and we're finally thrown into some gameplay. The very first thing that immediately caught my attention were the driving physics. They're pretty strange at first, at least coming from someone who hasn't played the previous games. Maybe they were always like this, I don't know. They definitely take some getting used to though. I think the problem is mostly the camera, which I'll talk about more later, but it feels like it's hard to know what the car is doing or what it's going to do. Like a lot of times it feels like the car suddenly loses all grip completely without warning or indication that that was going to happen. You'll be turning and it feels like you have plenty of grip, then boop, the car pivots and now you're drifting. The way the drifting gets activated, it feels like it's a switch that just gets toggled on. And it's as if the car locks onto a rail at whatever angle that it's at. And it won't get off that rail until you recover from the slide, which is really hard to do for some reason. I always have traction control turned off whenever I play a racing game, so maybe this is just a me problem. I don't know. Honestly though, once you do get the hang of it, it can be pretty satisfying to pull off some nice slides every now and then. Let's move on from the physics though. After you finish all the introductory races, you go through another cutscene, which I gotta say, the cutscenes in this game feel really long. I will give it to them. They can be pretty cool and creative, and honestly, they are well done. They shot real live action scenes for some of these cutscenes, which is pretty cool. But damn dude, this is the racing game. I just want to get to driving. When you do get past that, we're finally given the chance to choose our first car, which is normally arguably the most important moment in any racing game. If you're like me, this is the car that you're going to go through a lot with. You learn with this car, you grow with this car. This is the car that you experience the game as a rookie with. Normally, it teaches you everything you know, so by the time you upgrade to something faster later on, you'll already be a pro, and you'll owe it all to this car. Except in this game, this car is completely useless. And that goes for any personal vehicle you buy too. That's because
Oh my god, what is that? Oh my god! What is that?
Yeah, Ubisoft Connect has these in-game notifications that pop up and block your view. And they don't go away until you open up the menu. I endured this little menu to go into the settings and turn this off because I'm not bad to deal with that shit. Okay, back to what I was saying. Your personal vehicles are useless because this game's core gameplay element comes in the form of these event playlists. They're a set of races that surround whatever theme the playlist is about. Made in Japan, the first playlist is themed around Japanese cars and street racing culture, and in each race you're loaned a different iconic Japanese car, with the other characters giving you little history lessons about the car you're driving or about the theme of the playlist while you race.
By the way, do you know what NSX stands for?
New Sports Car Experimental.
I wasn't asking you, Hina.
And that's basically it for all the playlists. Whatever theme the playlist is about, you're loaned a car that fits that theme in every race, which means that you don't get to use any of your personal cars for any of these. Once you complete a playlist, you unlock the races that were in it in custom mode, which is the only time outside of multiplayer that it seems that these cars are actually used for racing. Otherwise, it's basically just a taxi for getting from event to event. Like for real, what's the point of buying any vehicle in this game if you're just gonna get loaned one every time? But whatever, let's talk a little more about the playlist. I mean, these are the main thing you're supposed to do in the game. There isn't really a story in this game. Like the premise really is as if this were a thing that happens in real life. You go to this festival, you participate in some events, and that's kind of it. These playlists are like the main event of the game. All the other activities and events are just kind of extra stuff for you to do. But okay, I do want to let off with the hating for a little bit because there are a couple nice things that I can say about the playlist. I think the idea of them is cool. Like it gives you a tour of all the different stuff you can do in the game. And I honestly think that these do a pretty good job of letting you experience a little bit of everything. Some of the more straightforward playlists have things like road racing, off-road racing, drag racing, but other playlists add some more interesting events like monster truck racing, which is just chaotic.
The perfect hip-hop jewel for this crown.
Oh my. Oh my god. Holy shit, bro.
And part of that has to do with the horrendous AI, but I said I'd stop hating for a moment, so I'll get back to that. There's also boat racing, which is also pretty unhinged, but in an enjoyable way.
idiot. Slithering. Watch out, watch out, watch out, watch out!
The sky and the stars.
Honestly, I had a lot of fun doing this boat race because I thought it was hilarious. Occasionally, playlists will add a little twist, like the portrait playlist requiring you to drive cleanly because everything you hit will decrease the value of the car you're driving. Unfortunately though, that's kind of where the positives stop. Like I said, these give you a taste of everything the game has to offer. And while that can be a good thing just for the sake of experiencing all the different event types, the problem is that the game aggressively holds your hand through the entire process. Like for example, right after you select your first car, the game immediately puts you on a screen where you're forced to select a playlist to complete. And the second you're dropped onto the streets of Hawaii, a waypoint to the first race in the playlist is already set to go, with the AI assistant Kara talking to you and guiding you through every experience.
We put this playlist together to give you a taste of Japanese racing culture.
And once you do start a race, the various characters in the game will talk to you during the race like I said before. Honestly, this is kind of annoying sometimes. Like sometimes I'm just trying to drive and these guys won't shut up. But anyway, this is pretty normal for racing games to do. Usually you're guided through the first like 3 or 4 races of a racing game just so you know how everything works so that by the time the tutorial is over, you're good. This obviously makes sense. Here's the thing though. This isn't a tutorial. This is just how the core gameplay is. Once you finish a race in a playlist, you follow the waypoint to the next race with Kara yapping your ear off, and you do that a couple more times until the playlist is over. You get a free car after finishing it, which would be cool if personal vehicles in this game actually served a purpose. And then you immediately get a pop-up where you're conveniently able to start the next playlist, with Kara even urging you to do so.
New playlist ahead. Let's go. A playlist is ready to try. Let's go try it. Let's complete this playlist.
And then the process just repeats. I remember at one point thinking, wow, this is a long ass tutorial. And then at some point I realized, wait, this is just the game. This effectively makes the core gameplay feel like one massive tutorial. And even though there are a few more interesting event types sprinkled in here and there, they don't happen that often. For example, the monster truck races and the boat races that I mentioned before seem like they immediately get brushed aside after you finish them. Seriously, aside from the race you see on screen that I got the footage from, I never got to do another boat race or even a monster truck race. It's like they were just trying to get these over with and out of the way so that players can't say they didn't try them. I was hoping to also do air races because, oh yeah, this game has airplanes in it too, but the only event that involves flying is this one where you're alone flying through hoops looking at different parts of Hawaii. So it's basically just a sky tour. I did briefly try out some of the other stuff like the aforementioned custom mode and the main stage events. I figured these would have some more interesting things to offer considering the game puts main stage front and center right at the top of everything, which means this must be pretty important, right? Unfortunately, they're not as cool as I hoped. They're basically just a couple of existing event types with a certain theme. When I gave it a try, the theme was Rally Beast, where you get to drive a bunch of different rally cars. The first thing on here is Revisiting Playlists, which basically means you do the races from a playlist you already did, but with a different lone car now. Compete just means online races with the current theme, and Explore just means do the various activities around the map with a vehicle that relates to the theme of the event. There isn't really much to them, and I honestly don't feel very compelled to do them. If we're being honest, main stage events are just here for the purpose of trying to sell you the car pack that pertains to the theme. Oh yeah, this game has a lot of microtransactions. Everything else mainly just consists of road races, which are just not very fun for a couple different reasons. One is the physics that I already talked about, and the other thing is something that I already hinted at, which is the AI. These motherfuckers have absolutely no spatial awareness and have complete disregard for their surroundings. You could already have a line through a corner and the AI will just cut you off, push you out of the way, or take you out just so they can adhere to the line they're programmed to follow. To me, this is easily the most annoying thing to experience in any racing game. Anytime the AI has this kind of behavior, it's always the one thing that makes me the most mad. Once you're able to get away from them, things calm down though. But there is a problem with that because it's really easy to leave them behind or get left behind because the jump and difficulty levels in this game are way too far apart. For most of this, I had the difficulty set to 4, with 5 being the max. You'd think that the game would be pretty tough at 4, but it isn't. At all. Once you get past the crowd of traffic, it's really easy to build a massive gap between you and second place. So I turned it up to 5 to fix this. But now it's like the other racers have jet engines installed on their cars, and they just take off. Maybe I'm just trash, I don't know, but it's not like they just get away in the corners. Like even on the straights, they just effortlessly zoom away from you. It feels like instead of making the difficulty higher by making the drivers more skilled and pulling off some more advanced maneuvers and stuff, they just gave them more powerful cars. And it's not like you can just upgrade the car you're driving to keep up with them because you don't own the car that you're driving. As of writing the script for this video, it's been about a month since the last time I played the game, and reflecting on all this is making me realize just how unenjoyable the racing is, which is extremely bad because in case we all forgot, that's the one thing that's supposed to be enjoyable, racing in a racing game. I will say at the very least that the Donut Media playlist is definitely the one that I thought was the most fun and entertaining to play. Like take a look at this challenge where you have to go through a course in a Ford Raptor that has no brakes and the cruise control is stuck on, and every cone you hit gives you a time penalty. And every lap, your speed increases. So you have to get real creative with getting around certain parts of the course without hitting any cones. I actually replayed this one a few times to see if I could do a better job each time. This genuinely was probably the only time while playing this game that I felt like I was really having fun, which is awesome because I'm a fan of Donut Media, and James Pumphrey in particular. But okay, let's shift our focus to other aspects of the game, like the cars, another very important thing about a racing game. Now, we've already talked about the physics, but there's other things about the driving experience that I think are noteworthy, like the sound of the cars. And honestly, they're not bad, but a little inconsistent. Some of the engine sounds are great. But there's other times where I was left really disappointed. Like for example, the Porsche Carrera GT. This is by many car enthusiasts to be considered the second best sounding car in existence. And I was obviously really excited to hear how it sounded in the game. And, well,
What the f? What the hell is this? Why does this thing sound like a Viper?
hearing how this car sounded in this game had to be one of the most disappointing experiences I've ever had. In case anyone needs a refresher, this is how the car sounds in real life. And here's how it sounds in the Crew Motorfest. But there are other things I like about the driving experience. Like for example, I love the interior cam. The interiors look nice, and I like how the hand movements on the steering wheel are more realistic. Most of the time. But I like that the hands actually move around more and cross over like you might do in real life. Not like in other games where the wheel seems to turn only like 6 degrees both ways and that's full lock. The other thing I like about the interior cam is, if you remember earlier in the video, I said that the unpredictability the cars have might mostly have to do with the camera. And that's because for some reason, driving rear-wheel drive cars feel way better and a lot easier when I'm using this camera. Like I'm sure you've noticed that a lot of the footage is in this perspective. And at first I was doing this because I wanted to get more shots from this view because I wanted the gameplay footage to be more varied. But then I realized I actually like driving, or at least racing, with this camera angle. Here's some footage of me trying to drive this Ferrari F12 Berlinetta, a rear-wheel drive V12 car with over 700 horsepower. Notice how I'm having a really hard time trying to keep it under control with the chase cam, only to suddenly turn into Michael Schumacher the moment I change into the interior cam. So overall, I think they did a pretty good job with this perspective, but this cam can be a problem when you try to look behind you though, because when you do that, it changes to a rear view while still being inside of the vehicle. And honestly, I like this. I've always thought it was cool when racing games did this because I feel like it adds immersion to the gameplay. The issue is that in this game, it doesn't always work the best. On some cars like this Lamborghini Aventador, it changes to an exterior camera, but this makes sense because the back window on this car is so small that it would probably be useless trying to look out of it in the game. But for some reason, on cars like this Camaro, they didn't do that. And instead, when you try to look behind you, you get a nice view of the rear seats. Thanks. I really wanted to make sure that the stitching and the upholstery was holding everything together back there, because I can tell you that the ones holding my sanity together while playing this game are about to give. But okay, let's see. What about some other stuff about the cars, like the customization and the upgrades? The upgrade system is really weird. You get parts by completing events and finding these loot crates hidden around the map, and whatever part you get is completely random. You could get a suspension upgrade, you could get an exhaust upgrade, you never know. It reminds me of the upgrading system that Need for Speed Payback had. which I hated. You don't have to pay for any of them, which is nice, I guess, but I feel like I would just rather pay money to simply have the freedom to pick whatever specific part I want to put on the car. Certain parts also have these things called affixes, which are basically just little perks that the park gives you. But honestly, I have nothing to comment on regarding these because one, like I've said many times, you never even use the car that they're getting put on, and two, I just simply never paid any attention to or noticed their effects and forgot they existed most of the time. And the customization, well, it's there. You get a decent selection of body parts, and I do like that you're able to customize the interior a little bit. That's not a thing many games do, and I feel like it should be a more normal thing, especially considering most racing games nowadays have an interior camera. Other than that, I mean, the wheel selection is honestly just small and mid. And one thing that's insane to me is that you can't adjust the ride height of any car, even with the top level suspension upgrade installed. And look, I know that this is an arcade racer, so I wasn't expecting the game to include tuning where you can tweak and adjust different settings on the car to improve the way that the car handles. But Need for Speed games let you adjust height and camber, because yes, while those are definitely adjustments that affect the way that the car drives, they are also definitely an aspect of visual customization, in my opinion. So it's fair to say that I was pretty salty when I found out that I couldn't slam my S2000. There is also a livery editor, but honestly, I didn't even bother touching it because I just don't care enough. I'm someone who tends to dump a ton of time into livery editors, so I felt like investing that much time and energy into a livery for a car that doesn't even get used for racing didn't make sense to me. Especially since by this point, I already had the feeling that I wasn't going to be playing the game much after this anyways. The second reason why I also didn't touch it is because I wasn't even allowed to on this car. Why? Because it has a preset livery on it already. Yes, the little red stripe with the Motorfest logo running along the bottom of it is a preset livery. This means that you're locked out of customizing any livery related things on this car. It's not unusual to be gifted a special car in a racing game like one you get after defeating a boss, or in this case, the ones you get from completing playlists. And these cars normally have a preset livery and aftermarket body parts that you're not allowed to change, but this is a personal vehicle that is gifted to you at the start of the game. A car that is completely yours, that you own, that wasn't previously a boss car or a special prize car. I know I'm probably nitpicking and making this a bigger deal than it really is, but I think it was a super weird decision to make. Like, this game seems to focus a lot on personalizing and making a car your own by taking a quick glance at some of the cars on display in this like showroom area that you spawn in when you boot up the game.
What the fuck? Nah, look at the wheels on this one. What? That shit's just not for me, bro. That shit really just not for me.
So not letting you make a custom livery for the car that they give you at the start is just kind of strange. Speaking of showrooms, the dealership is also something that I think needs some discussing. One of the most important aspects of a racing game is its car roster. And some modern racing games like to boast a huge roster and go, look how many cars I have. Which honestly, I always thought was kind of silly. Like, why do I care if the game has 1,000 cars if I'm only going to buy like 10 to 20 of them? And out of that 10 to 20, use like 5 of them the most. This game very clearly seems to be one of those games that has a big roster simply just for the bragging rights. I do want to say though that there are some pretty cool additions in this game that you don't really see anywhere else that often. Like several concept cars and just generally more obscure and lesser known stuff. Along with some of these makes that seem to be custom, non-licensed vehicles that the developers made. One car brand that I was pretty surprised and honestly really happy to see were the roof cars. For those who don't know, back when Need for Speed released Porsche Unleashed in 2000, they signed a licensing agreement with Porsche that made it so that only Need for Speed games were allowed to have Porsches in their rosters for the next 16 years. Oh my God. So in that 16 years, all the other game developers weren't allowed to include Porsches. But since Roof is a company that tunes Porsches and sells them as their own separate car make, game developers were allowed to include these instead, which worked great as a Porsche replacement. But when that licensing agreement between Need for Speed and Porsche expired, and other developers were allowed to include Porsches in their games again, they took that 16-year-long loyal friendship they had with Roof, ripped it up, threw it in the trash, and ditched them for Porsche. Gran Turismo still features roofs in their game, which is nice, but Forza just completely abandoned them, which is honestly just so messed up. So I'm glad that the crew gave them the respect they deserve and included them here. But yeah, I think that the unique additions to the car list are a cool touch, though I'm sure you've noticed a trend where I can't talk about the good things about something in the game without also mentioning the bad things. This car list has a lot of content bloats, meaning there's a lot of things in this list that are just there for the sole purpose of increasing the number of vehicles in the game. Like, there's a lot of special editions of cars, which are just pre-built variants of a certain model. Like, you'll have a certain car model, and then a drift version of that same model, and an off-road version of that same model, and so on and so forth. Like, let's look at the Dodge Challenger. It has 11 versions. 11. This is honestly really dumb to me. If I want to build a 370Z drift car, why wouldn't I just buy a stock one and build it myself? Another notable thing regarding the dealership is the ability to test drive any vehicle in the roster for a minute completely for free. Honestly, I think this is a really cool feature, and I think more games should do it. It lets you get a little bit of seat time in whatever car you want, which is nice if there's a car you really want to buy but you can't afford, which seems to be a normal thing. A common complaint I saw when looking up what other people thought about this game was that everything is extremely expensive. and the payouts you get from completing events isn't enough to balance this out. And I honestly can understand this because, as I said before, this game has a lot of microtransactions, so it makes sense that the developers would make everything really expensive so that you have to spend your real money to buy whatever you want. The thing is though, I personally never felt the effects of this. The upgrades are free, you're loaned a car for every playlist event, and you win a free car at the end of them, so you basically never had to spend any of your money unless there's a specific car you want to buy. This was the case for me too because I wanted to buy this Aventador, but acquiring it took so little effort that I was able to get it in my second play session. Doing playlists in this game is such a repetitive and monotonous loop of winning a race, driving to the next event, winning that race, and then getting a free car that it's honestly super easy to just space out and lose track of how much progress you're making in such a short amount of time. Like, I never looked at how much money I currently had until I checked to see if I had enough to buy the Aventador. And same goes for the performance parts. I was able to max out my S2000 with all the highest rated parts without ever once using it in a race. And something I noticed while driving my maxed out S2000 is that the sense of speed in this game isn't that great. There was one time where I was driving my S2000 and I happened to glance down to the speedo and I realized that I was doing 200 miles an hour and I didn't even know.
I just want to point out that somehow this car is already capable of going 200 miles an hour.
Okay. I think we seriously have to take another break from focusing on the negatives and look at some of the things about this game that I actually like. First is the visuals. There are times where some things look a little questionable, but I think generally speaking, this is a pretty looking game. And way more often than not, I find myself admiring the environment rather than wincing at it. In fact, I'd go as far as to say that the map and environment are probably my favorite thing about this game, which I know is pretty controversial to say considering the monumental downsides from the last two games, but it's true. Do I think an entire map of the US would be cool? Absolutely. But I think Hawaii was still a great choice. The world feels vibrant and lively, and the tropical vibes I think go well with the festival theme. I think the more grassy jungle areas look the best with all the plants everywhere, and the lighting definitely helps. There are also these AI cars that drive around the map while you're in free roam. They complete activities and drive to events as if they're real players too, which was honestly pretty confusing to me at first because I thought these were real people until I saw an actual player with a username over them. This is honestly kind of weird because it's pretty much just an attempt to cover up how inactive the game is, but at least it does make the world feel more populated and energetic. And all the things around the map, like the big balloon markers that show where certain events are a cool touch. There's even these structures scattered around the map that look almost like abandoned stages that people performed on, perhaps in previous Motorfest festivals. The ability to switch from a car to a boat or plane and vice versa at any time while in free roam is also a really cool feature that carries over from the second game. It's honestly so satisfying to switch from a car to a boat right as you approach a body of water. It's also really fun and hilarious to fly to a location you're headed to and to swap into a car mid-flight to get to it. Unfortunately though, this just isn't enough to undo the overwhelming amount of negatives that I had while playing this game. Now look, I know that I've said some pretty crazy stuff about this game, but I truthfully and honestly don't hate it. Which I know sounds crazy coming from me since I just spent the last 30 minutes or however long this video is going to be absolutely ripping this game a new one. I don't want people to watch this and think, oh, he must be a Forza fanboy, he must be a Need for Speed fanboy. I already said before that I've played a lot of racing games, many different titles, arcade racers, sim racers. I truly and honestly have no bias for or against any racing game. Remember what I said at the beginning, if the game's good, then the game's good. If I enjoy playing the game, if it's engaging to me and I genuinely have fun playing it, then it doesn't matter to me what franchise the game is from. Unfortunately, this game just isn't that for me. I went into this game with no preconceived notions, both because I haven't played the first two games, but also because I didn't look into this game at all before playing it. I didn't watch any reviews or any in-depth gameplay. I went into this with no expectations and was feeling optimistic. So coming out of it as disappointed as I am is just tragic. The problem is that this game is kind of the culmination of everything that the term festival racer represents. It's a game made by a big corporation and follows the typical formula that's main purpose is to sell units and keep people hooked so that the silly graph on Steam showing how many people are playing the game at any moment keeps looking as good as possible. You open up the game and are bombarded by all these different options for activities and events and game modes to do, and somehow the game still manages to be boring. Like, all of this is just a whole lot of nothing. These types of games are like junk food. It's just a bunch of empty calories. You can eat a bag of chips or some candy and it might fill you up, but you don't actually get any proper nutrients from them. That's how I view this game, and honestly how I view Forza Horizon 5 too. There's all these things you can do, and it may be a bit entertaining to you for a moment, but there's no real engagement or satisfaction from doing any of it. One of the biggest issues as to why I personally have a hard time with these types of games is that there's no real sense of progression or accomplishment. There's nothing you're working towards. No boss to beat, no story to see the ending of. You just do an endless loop of the same races and activities, and if you do somehow finish them all, that's it. And saying finishing is being generous because there's things like the main stage events, or in the case of Forza, the season playlists I think they're called, which refresh to a new set of the same things to do every single week. If I'm being honest, I kind of already got bored of this game on my third play session. And very soon after that, I felt like I was just forcing myself to play the game just for the sake of getting footage for this video, which is never a good thing. And eventually I just decided, yeah, I just don't want to play this game anymore.
Okay, honestly, I think I'm done with this game, to be honest with you. I think I'm good.
I remember at one point after playing this game for the last time thinking that I was being really hard on it. Like maybe I was just being a hater or something. So I looked up other reviews to see what everyone else thought about the game, only to find out that a lot of the complaints I had were echoed by a vast majority of the critics that gave this game a try.
The final figure is bolstered significantly by counting multiple versions of the same car simply because it has some stickers spackled on it and a fancy nickname.
I just don't like this system. I prefer just buying the parts outright.
AI seemingly has no care in the world for you. You may as well not exist on the track as far as they're concerned.
There are over 600 vehicles ready to be purchased in the shop, but after you're done with the purchase, you don't really do anything with it afterwards. You can adjust your car and add some valuable parts to it, of course, but then you start a playlist and it is basically like it never mattered.
I remember seeing a YouTube comment one time that I think summed it up pretty well. I don't remember exactly how it went, but it was something along the lines of, festival racers are the embodiment of the phrase, so much to do, no reason to do it. So then, what are my final thoughts on the Crew Motorfest? I don't think that this is necessarily a bad game. It's definitely not the best racing game out there, but I also don't think it's the worst. It's just okay, which is literally what it means for something to be mid. Now, if you remember, near the start of the video, I said that I got this game on sale. I paid like 20 bucks for this game, maybe 21, I can't remember. Do I think it was worth it? Honestly, not really. But you know what? 20 bucks ain't too big of a deal. So then you might be asking, well, what's the full price of the game? $70. Whoa. Okay, hold on track. Surely you mean $70 for the deluxe edition or something like that. No, it's $70 for the standard game. If I paid that much for this game, I'd probably stand up while driving the Vert going 100 miles an hour straight into a clothesline. So would I recommend this game? I honestly don't think I can, especially not at full price. If you like this game, good, I'm happy for you. But I think Ubisoft took one look over at Playground Games and saw how many racks the Forza series was bringing them in, and they went, yeah, we need to do that. And it shows. It really shows. But okay, I think I'm done being a hater. And honestly, after playing this, I need to play something to bring my spirits back up. I need to play a racing game that's actually fun, engaging, and feels like it was developed by a passionate crew of car enthusiasts that are doing it for the love of cars and racing, and not just for the money. But that is a topic for another video. All right, see y'all later. I always have traction. Oh my gosh. I always have traction. Oh my gosh. Why can't I say that game? Traction. I always have traction. Dude, I can't say it in a sentence. I always have traction control turned off. Dude, I can't say the fucking word.